The Patriot is a dramatic monologue written by the renowned English poet and playwright Robert Browning. He is well known for his dramatic monologues and is widely celebrated as one of the foremost poets of the Victorian era. In this poem, Browning talks about politics, patriotism, religious faith, and the harsh reality of the leaders who are true to this sense of patriotism. It speaks about the sacrifice of such leaders who are misunderstood by the people. The speaker of the poem is a patriot. The poem is a monologue of this patriot speaker who narrates his tale to us as he has been taken to the scaffold to be executed publicly for his misdeeds. He tells us of his situation, how he was once well loved by everyone and how he is now despised by the same people. The patriot is innocent of having done any misdeeds and is only out of the misunderstanding of the people that he is put to death. His death sentence is for the wrong reason, and although he has tried to persuade the people to listen to him, it has done him no good. It was roses and roses all the way, with myrtle mixed in my path like mad. The houses seemed to heave and sway. The church spires flamed, such flags they had, a year ago on this very day. The poem starts with the patriot describing an event, a grand public welcome, that took place a year ago on that very same day. He is reminiscing the past and he builds a picture for us as he remembers that day. His walking path was covered with lots and lots of rose petals, with myrtles mixed in them. The path was festooned with these flowers for him. People standing on the roof of their houses cheered for him as he passed by. They were overjoyed to see him. The spires of the church, pointed tapering roofs we generally see on old cathedrals and similar buildings, were covered with flaming flags that the people had put up for a celebration. People were overwhelmingly delighted to greet the hero and were enthusiastic to see him as he passed by. It is only logical to assume that this grand celebration must be as a result of some achievement on the speaker's part. Perhaps it was a victory in war, or the assemblage for fighting one, or winning a popular election to an office, or being nominated as a ruler, or maybe something else. It can be assumed at this point in the poem that it concerned the common people highly, and they were happy on the occasion. The patriot is seen as a public hero in this stanza who is greeted with much love and affection by the commoner. The air broke into a mist with bells. Old walls rocked with a crowd and cries. Had I said, good folk, mere noise repels, but give me your son from yonder skies, they had answered, and afterward, what else? In the second stanza of the poem, the speaker continues narrating the old story from the same day a year ago. He describes the event to the readers. People were rejoicing by ringing bells, and the entire atmosphere was thick with its noise. They were standing on some kind of old structure and cheering for the patriot with their cries rocking the walls. Now the patriot says he had asked the public for anything, even the dearest things on which their sustenance depends. They would have readily given it to him. Such great was his image. They would then ask him what else he wanted. We can see the exuberance of the people at the sight of the patriot. The poet is trying to establish the kind of popularity the speaker had through this stanza. Alack, it was I who leaped at the sun, to give it my loving friends to keep. Not man could do, have I left undone. And you see my harvest, what I reap, this very day, now a year is run. The third stanza of the poem is the speaker's discourse on what all he did for his country. It begins with the poet giving a subtle reference to the old Greek mythological tale of Icarius and Daedalus. Icarius was the son of the great inventor Daedalus, and the story revolves around the escape of these two men from a high tower where they were held prisoners by making wings out of bird feathers and wax. Icarius, taken aback with the ability of flight, flies too close to the sun, which causes the wax in his wings to melt and his eventual fall, which kills him. Just like Icarius, the speaker admits that he too was overly ambitious and leaped at the sun. Giving the sun his loving friends to keep may suggest that his action somehow caused the death of his close friends. Here again, we can hypothesize that the Patriot is talking about some battle that claimed the lives of his dear ones. He did everything a man could have done to make things right. Despite this, he is facing his undeserved end. He calls to attention the miserable state he is in. The terms harvest and reap are closely seen as common metaphors for karma, and the poet uses this to convey that what he is facing is not what he truly deserves. He says it has been a year since that day. Here, the poet ends the speaker's flashback. There is nobody on the housetops now, just a palsied few at the window set. For the best of the sight is all allow at the shambles gate, or better yet, by the scaffold's very foot I trow. In this stanza, the speaker returns to the present and talks about what he sees. He describes the present setting and in a way contrasts it with the one on the same day a year ago. Now he is being very convicted and is being led to the gallows to be put to death. As opposed to the setting in the first stanza, now the place is all empty. There is nobody on the rooftops cheering for him. Only old men who are taken down by palsy or paralysis and unable to cross the threshold of their houses are watching the patriot as he marches towards his death. The reason why no one is there to see the speaker is because people have gathered at the shambles gate, the gate of the gallows, to see him die. The people want to be where the action is. The speaker further makes the heart-touching comment that the best sight is at the gate of the slaughterhouse or at the very foot of the scaffold. I go in the rain, and more than needs, a rope cuts my wrist behind, and I think, by the feel of my forehead bleeds, for they fling whoever has a mind, stones at me for my years' misdeeds. The fifth stanza is the continuation of the previous one and further describes the speaker's humiliation at the hands of the people. The poet starts with filling up the setting even more. It is raining as the speaker is walking towards the scaffold. His hands are tied behind by a tight rope, so tight that it cuts his wrist. He has now arrived closer to the shambles gate, where all the people are gathered. The patriot is in his own mind, knowing the steadfast certainty of death ahead of him. As he is walking, he thinks he is bleeding from his forehead. He can only feel the trickling of blood. People throwing stones at him are causing the injuries. So stones have replaced the petals of roses. He says that the people who are throwing stones are the ones who have an active mind and aware of his misdeeds. The speaker does not seem to be angry with these people for throwing stones at him. It suggests that despite the treatment he is receiving, he doesn't blame the people. He knows that they have misunderstood him. Thus I entered, and thus I go. In triumphs, people have dropped down dead, paid by the world. What dost thou owe me? God might question. Now instead, this God shall repay. I am safer so. The last stanza of the poem reflects on the patriot's death. It is full of philosophical and religious ideas. Thus I entered, and thus I go. His entry and exit from life. Position and people's minds in the presence of so many others sums up the speaker's life as well. He says that in his triumphs, people have dropped him down red. This suggests that he looks at his predicament as a triumph. He believes that he stood by the right things and thus considers himself victorious in defeat. The final three lines of the stanza deal with the ideas of the speaker. Yet again, we see Browning's stout religious belief. He believes that God might say, "Your sins were already washed away when you died. The people sought to it. They punished you. What now do you expect from me? You are now free of all corruption." Thus the patriot thinks that the punishment he got is the mortal world has purged him and that he hopes to go to heaven instead of hell. He feels safer knowing that God knows he stood for what he thought was right and thus he will be safe under him.